I guess we'll get started since everybody would like, it's 3:02 already. I'd like to welcome everybody to our panel discussion about Empatico. My name is Michael Dunlea, and I am a second grade going to third grade teacher in the state of New Jersey. And I was a part of Empatico, and we'll start the introductions and we'll let you know what's going on with it. And we'll start with Melissa.
Hi, my name is Melissa Collins. I am a proud second grade teacher from Memphis, Tennessee, and I was a part of the Empatico Fellowship. I enjoyed my time with the fellowship.
And I am Ashlee Upp. I am a third grade teacher in Camden, Delaware, and I too was an Empatico fellow.
So to explain a little bit about Empatico, the fellowship that we were all a part of, the KIND organization, which is, you're probably familiar with the KIND nutrition bars and things, they set up a nonprofit wing of their company to promote empathy and connecting classes and students around the world. And so they created a free online resource for teachers to use to access students and teachers in, around the country or the world. And I'm just going to read to you just their description so that I don't misinform you. Empatico is a free online learning tool that enables students to practice communication and leadership skills needed in a divided country and interdependent world. By the end of 2020, the platform endeavors to reach more than 1 million students in 25 countries and make it possible for kids everywhere to connect with one another. And so what they did was they started a challenge called the Empathy Challenge, and we partnered 10 teachers from around the country with 10 others. And what we experienced was a very enriching learning activity that really provided a tremendous amount of outcomes, more than what most of us expected. And I'll let the fellows explain a little bit more about that. But in the first, to get this going, I just kind of want to know, in the room, do we have anyone that has ever connected with classrooms through a virtual platform? Okay, so Wendy, and what have you used, or what types of connections?
So I used Empatico.
Oh.
This year, and I was Wilmington, Delaware, and I connected with a classroom in Minnesota right at the end of the school year. It was wonderful.
Oh, that's excellent. So we might, well, you might be on this panel. I swear it's not a plant. This is all organic. Yeah. So why don't we go ahead and start with Melissa? Why don't you tell everybody about now just a little background information. Melissa's in Memphis, teaches second grade. I just taught second grade, and I'm in New Jersey. And my co-teacher, Stacy Delaney, and Melissa were partnered in the fellowship. So why don't you start off by telling everybody about it?
When we first connected, and looking at Michael's class, I was like, oh, your class is all white. My class was all black, and so it was like we had to do something about it and give our children a chance to interact with a diverse population. And so I was excited about using Empatico. And I'm the one, I will run from technology. If anything is complex, it will just drive me in another direction. But Empatico was a very easy tool. I said what days my students were available, and it just happened. It was that easy. But what I really noticed is that my students changed. It really did something for them. Because this year, it was very challenging. I had a lot of social and emotional issues in my classroom. And so I had to start doing something different for my students. And so, Michael, when my kids got a chance to interact with your students, they loved it. They wanted to not only do it weekly, but every day. And I was often getting a text from Stacy, can you talk to my class today? And I was like, yes, because it really helped with my culture. And so I was very excited about the opportunity. I'm glad that it happened for my students, because they began to understand really what empathy is. They understood the human difference. They learned how to be kind and respectful to each other. And when they began to argue, they began to say the student's whole entire name. I would not sit back. I would listen to them, and they would tell why they were upset. And so I really love the structure of Empatico because they got to interact with the classroom that was different from theirs. And you and I had a conversation, was wondering, when do those biases set in? When do they really realize to be racist? And so my students, they love the students in New Jersey. They didn't discuss color or what somebody looked like. One of your students say, hey, the boy in the orange shirt would be a nice buddy.
Yeah.
And I knew then that we were moving in the right direction.
I think it's important to jump in and say that my student population was the inclusion classroom. And so we had children of various situations going on in the room. And there was one child who had had a lot of social issues. And this gave him an opportunity to really start off brand new with a friendship that was very late in the year. And so he really connected and loved that experience because it was his friend. And that was what they kept using, that way, like, oh, we're going to talk to my friend today. And we did a little bit different where we allowed them to singularly hook up and use, they would talk to one another. We had them pen pal each other, and then we would partner them together. And it was amazing to see that connection grow. And to your point about at what point, I honestly thought we were going to be kind of fixing racism in their minds. And my big takeaway was that we're not fixing it when they're 7 and 8. We're planting the seeds to prevent it. I asked one of my students, Cassidy, and at the end we had them write books. They interviewed each other, and they had to ask questions that were kind of eliciting information about one another. And it was to draw those comparisons, like what do you have in common and then what's different. And at the end I said, Cassie, what did you have in common with your partner? And she said, well, we both like gymnastics and to read. And I'm like, all right, well, what was something different? Thinking that we would get to the skin color issue. And she said, well, I'm not very good in math and she's really good in math. I said, okay, what else? She goes, well, there's the color. And I thought, okay, deep breath, here we go. This is going to be the chance we were waiting to really fix it, right? It's, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to be the teacher, fix racism. And so she goes, my favorite is pink and her favorite is teal. And I thought, and there it is. We're projecting our worries and fears into what we think we need to fix, and really what we need to do is just let them develop those interactions and those friendships so that later in life, when inevitably social prejudice will be thrust upon them, it will contradict with their memory and their experience from having met someone in 2nd grade. And that's the power of, I felt, that was my big takeaway, is that we're able to, segregation, I mean, you have an all-black class, I have an all-white class, and it shouldn't be that way. Both our states have diverse populations, so we can't typically fix our class lists, but maybe through a tool like Empatico, we can find a way to prevent those sociological issues that we don't have control over. Maybe we can make a dent in them or pick at them. So why don't we go now to Ashlee and hear about your story and who you were partnered with.
So I am a 3rd grade teacher in Camden, Delaware, and I was partnered with a classroom in Madison, Wisconsin, a 4th grade classroom. My school district is primarily rural, and their school district was in the city. So we had a big difference there. But immediately our kids took to each other. My students were really excited to learn more about the geographic location of their school. We looked on Google Maps and found where they were. When we did our meet and greet together, one of the first questions that the other classroom asked us was, do you have a play structure on your playground? And so we did a slideshow and showed them that we had all this green grass and this big play structure, and they didn't have that because they were in the middle of the city. And I think piggybacking off of what you guys said, at the end of the year, the very last day, my kids were like, is our teacher going to do Empatico next year? And I was like, we hope so. We hope so. But again, they just had a phenomenal experience. My classroom really focuses a lot on mindfulness, so the me aspect of social emotional learning, and this was the perfect opportunity to have them collaborate with another classroom to get that we portion, to communicate with others and understand others.
So one of the things that is, I think, unique about Empatico is that they have lessons that are ready to go on the website. One of the things that I think we would want everyone in this room to walk out of here thinking about is the complete ease of use that Empatico brings to the teacher. nobody needs more work, nobody needs one more thing on their plate. Empatico is a one-stop location where you can have the virtual interaction where you go, you register. It's really simple to sign up. It's free. We probably should have started with that.
Teachers, we love free.
Right. It's completely free. It's very simple to sign up. You put in your schedule, like you mentioned earlier, of your availability, and then you hit match. And the algorithm within the system will find a class that is diverse from you, whether it be a different, if you're rural, it'll purposely partner you with urban, perhaps a region of the country. It's even got global. Now it's going completely global. We have a lot of different countries signing on. And so in there, once you log in, you can then click on for video conferencing. And so it's all right there. You don't have to then go out and use any other platform or any other technology. It's completely self-contained. And they did start rolling out, as the year has gone on, lessons. And I have to be honest, I share with you when we were talking, getting ready for this, I don't usually subscribe to pre-existing conditions, pre-existing lessons. I always find that they're like Pinterest driven, or I don't typically have a great history of interacting with something that somebody else put in a box. And what really was surprising about these lessons were they were so simple, but they were profound as well, because I really went in with an expectation that my students were going to benefit so much because they were going to finally meet children of color and start friendships with them. And this was going to be this big takeaway for them. But in hindsight, that was huge. But in hindsight, them looking at themselves and analyzing where they're from and their culture, their region, and learning about where we were in New Jersey and why our festivals are our festivals. We have a cranberry festival, and for anyone that's not familiar in the room, New Jersey is the #1 producer of cranberries in the world, and Massachusetts. So if you have cranberries on Thanksgiving, they were probably grown right near where my students live. And so they didn't understand why we had a cranberry festival until we started to research it. And so we created this lesson, and we shared it with the children in Memphis. Now, the takeaway from your side was, when your students presented and said that there was the African Art Festival, my students go, why are they doing a festival on African art? And I said, well, why do you celebrate St. Patrick's Day? And he goes, because we're Irish. I'm like, well, they're African. Mm-hmm. And it was never, they just never stopped to think that there's a culture that comes from another part of the world that her students have. And it was that kind of an exchange, and they went, oh, yeah. And it made sense to them. But prior to that exchange, so it was really just this two-way learning. These lessons really provided a lens that went internal and reflective and made our students change about how they saw themselves. But then it also changed how they saw students who were different from them around the world and country. Do you want to speak to the lessons?
What I like about the structure of that Empatico platform is that you get a menu of options, right? And so you can decide which unit you would like to implement in your classroom. And so festivals around the world was one that my kids really showed a lot of interest in, as well as Michael. And what I liked about it is that it talks about how you can prepare the students. Like they had a PowerPoint where you can help build students' prior knowledge. And then they had an opportunity to interact with each other. And once they interact with each other, they begin to talk about the festivals in New Jersey. And then my class talked about the festivals in Memphis. And then we had an opportunity to reflect. And so, Michael, your students did an amazing job on telling why they did a particular thing. And so, what I noticed, even my students were able to ask their own questions. And when you see 7-year-olds ask questions to dive deeper with other 7-year-olds, that's when magic begins to happen. And as a teacher, you can sit back and say, hey, I trust Empatico. I trust this process. And as well, it was enough space where teachers still have the autonomy. Because you know how we're always told what to teach and how to teach with the curriculum. But here's an opportunity to say, hey, you have your menu of options. You can look over, you can reflect over how you want to implement it with your students. And you begin to foster a relationship with the teacher. The students begin to gain a mutual trust and respect from their peers. And so I saw my students beginning to think critical and creative through those units. And then we began to let our own magic happen by doing other amazing things to continue that conversation to happen each and every day, pairing them up with their buddies, thinking about different culminating activities. Pen pal letters. And then they wanted to give out gifts, so care packages became a part of it. And when you work with urban parents, sometimes they can be a little resistant, but it was like, they were stopping me in the parking lot and was like, hey, my child has this amazing friend in New Jersey. They didn't mention the race, but they said, hey, you think they'll like a Memphis State t-shirt or a sequins purse? They went far above what I could imagine. And I didn't mind spending $60-something to me. I thought about it. I was like, Michael, this is getting expensive.
I know. We started by sending you a box of seashells, and I'm like, oh God, I forgot you have to ship by the pound. Should have gotten smaller shells.
Right, but to see my kids' eyes light up when they knew they had a package.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Waiting for them.
Ours was after we got back from a field trip, and you'd think the field trip would have been the highlight of the day. Forget it. That field trip was completely gone from their memory, and there was just this box. It was, I think they kept saying, it's like Christmas.
Right, they did. They said this is the best day ever. And I remember Charlie saying, you know, hey, I need to talk to Cassidy. She makes me feel better. And it was just moments like that that made me almost want to cry about it, you know, really get emotional. And it made me start doing things differently to help develop the whole child. We started learning poems and singing songs.
So, if you know Melissa, you know she has this flair for drama and singing. I do not. And she put me on the spot like she normally does, and we had to sing We Are the World, and the kids, and my kids were like, we are the world. And yours were like doing all kinds of extra levels to it. So, but it was great. It broke down the barriers, and it made for a really wonderful moment.
It was interesting when you was trying to say, move left, right. Michael, are they moving left to the right?
It was total chaos.
Yes.
So, Ashlee, we want to hear about your lessons. Now, we did the festivals, and...
We did festivals as well.
Okay.
But to start off, the great thing about Empatico is there are 4 Empatico skills, and they also have lessons that accompany them. So my class actually started off doing perspective taking and respectful listening. And the respectful listening activity has these cards where the kids have to listen for a certain thing that they hear and then respond, kind of like an I Have Who Has game. And we finished it, and my kids were like, oh, can we play it again? Like,
right.
Move on. But they learn those skills before they go and interact with the class, which I think is really, really important, so you can come back to those later. We did the festivals lesson as well. So you start off with learning about festivals from around the world. So they learn about festival in Pakistan, the Day of the Dead festival,
And another one was in Japan,
California,
about the snow.
The snow creatures, and then Coachella.
Yes,
Coachella.
Because they had Beyonce. Yeah,
And
the children was happy about that festival.
I think 75% of my kids want to go to the Color Festival in Pakistan now. But my class ended up sharing about Old Dover Days in Dover, which is a colonial festival which brings in a lot of people. And in Wisconsin, they were not aware at all about like the Revolutionary War and the origins of the festival. So that brought up a really good conversation with my partner classrooms teacher. And then we learned about Bratfest from Wisconsin, and also La Fête des Marquettes. And they were both really eye-opening experiences for my kids as well. But we had a lot of fun going through and learning about the different festivals that we have in our area as well, because they're not things that we often think of, but they really enrich who we are as a state and as a community. And so it gave them the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into that as well.
And I know earlier when we were discussing this, Ashlee brought up that by being involved in Empatico, it automatically starts to project you into a world outside your building, in your classroom, in your hallway. And for many people that we know, the term connected educator is a very important way of thinking, in a way in which you can sometimes change the environment in which you're accessing resources or professional development ideas. And in almost every one of the teachers, actually every single person who participated, I spoke with them all, they all came back and said that it really changed who they were as a teacher. And it made a lot of them begin to step out of their comfort zone and begin to share this resource with other people because they believe so strongly in it and the power of it. And it turned a lot of the leadership buttons on. In some of them, I mean, Stacy Delaney, my co-teacher who was partnered with Melissa, has gone and spoken at faculty meetings. She's presenting to the entire school district opening PD. And we do have Wendy Turner, who's in the audience right now. She also participated in Empatico, so if you have anything you want to throw in there. And you just, when you get something, and we all know this, teachers, when you get something that's a really great idea, we don't want to just hoard it. We want to share it, because when you find something that is truly as profoundly impacting as this is, you definitely want everybody to do it, because the more people using it, the better the world will be, and hopefully the news will become less depressing, and that's the idea behind this, is that we are changing the world. That's why everyone became teachers, is that we want to change the lives of our students, and this is a way where you can really kind of get out of the four-walled classroom and really engage with the world at large and change the way the students see themselves in the process and the world at the same time. So what would you, have you shared this with other people?
I mean, it was honestly a natural kind of progression in my school. Once I started doing it and sharing the idea with everybody else, people would come to me, although I would reach out to them and be like, I want to do this lesson, can you help me get started? But it's really a self-sufficient thing. When teachers sign up, it's super easy. I had a teacher in my school be paired with a classroom in Honduras.
Wow.
So they're Chinese immersion, and we're connecting with a classroom in Honduras, which was really neat.
That's really cool.
But the more and more you talk about it, the more and more people just are naturally attracted to the platform because of its ease of use. It's just awesome.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, the lessons were really an unexpected asset to the entire platform. I really found them to be very valuable. But back to a point that you said, the autonomy, it allowed enough structure for the idea to be really strong, but then we made it our own. We used Google Slides to create a 4-slide presentation of our festivals. And we had, in my class, we had groups of 4 or 5, and they would work on a MacBook, and they would create a 4-slide Google slide, and we scaffolded the learning with that technology. They picked their 4 local festivals and created information on the slides, and we had some parameters. But then at the end of the year, the kids wanted to do their own research into a country of their choosing, because in addition to this, we were, once that happens, it's like Pandora. We were connecting with Croatia, Bangladesh. The kids went from thinking that there were 2 languages in the world when I asked them English and Spanish to knowing that there's 6,900 live languages. So we really did. So they all wanted to pick their own country, but they went and created their own 4 Google slide presentation on their own from the learning that occurred during the Empatico lesson. So it really is, most of what you learn using these lessons is very transferable and very applicable to the entire rest of the day. A lot of what you were saying about those social skills and things, I think Dina Morrison in Oregon, who was partnered with, I believe, Peter Lorcan in the Mariana Islands, she put an anchor poster up that was generated from it and referred to it as almost class rules. And it really was something that they constantly went back to. So it really became a thread that went through her entire day, not just during the interaction time. So anything else that you want to add, or we can start taking some questions?
I think another great part of the lessons was the reflection piece at the end. There is a reflection circle structure that you can kind of take your own way, but when we were all sitting together, and there's an accompanying worksheet, and I would have them jot down their ideas on their paper first and then use that respectful communication to share out. It was really neat to see the different perspectives of even the kids within my classroom and what they took from that reflection and that experience. So I think from the beginning of the preparation and getting them excited about Empatico and the lessons that they're going to be doing, to the actual interaction, and then to wrapping it all up with the reflection, it's just a pretty seamless process and just really exciting for the students and for the teachers.
And on the website, all the tools and resources are there for you. Like they have the strategy Me Too. You can look at that video real quick and see how that should happen in the classroom. And that was so unique and special about it. You didn't have to wonder, what does that mean? You can click on that link and you can see what strategies need to be implemented in the classroom. They gave you, if it was the reflection circle, they gave you an image of how that could work and look. And so it's just amazing how the students do begin to know social skills. They begin to learn, which is very important with the global society that we live in, that they're able to communicate effectively with people. And I really believe wholeheartedly in that with my little ones. I have them doing that already, but it's just wonderful to understand and to see how Empatico believes in that too. You know, just trying to get the students ready. They work well with ages 7 through 11 years old. Before those biases begin to set in, they get an opportunity to work with a diverse population. They learn what it really means to be kind and respectful to one another, and that is important with all kids, but especially in the urban sector. Those babies are going through challenging situations, and so they do need an opportunity to talk and know how to communicate effectively with one another instead of being argumentative. And that's what I really liked in them fostering the relationship with someone different than them. And they were always looking at me and saying, when can we get somebody else? You know, through Zoom or Empatico. So they were wanting to meet other people and learn about how they were different around the world. And they talked to somebody from India and they could see, hey, you're blessed. You have several computers and you're able to have different resources that we don't have. So that made them have a different sense of respect. And so they really understand how the humans are different, and they really discovered a love for people. And so that's why I love Empatico and just interacting with other teachers around the world. So any of us can connect through Empatico. So
there's an article that was released when they came up with this, and it started off with just 3rd and 4th grade. So the initial age bracket was 8 to 10, and then they've gone to 7 to 11, and they're going to continue to go out in that fashion. But what's really good about it and why I respect that is that they did it right. Even though it was a really narrow band, which was a criticism of some people when they wanted to get in, and it's a kindergarten, we could do this in kindergarten, yes, but they didn't rush it, and I'm glad they didn't, because to tell you the truth, like I said, everything about it has been a real plus. But I just want to read this one paragraph, which kind of really sums up our experience. It says, neuroscience suggests that changing the adult mind is an uphill battle because so much of our brain has already been wired and we have developed default assumptions about those who are different. In 8 to 10-year-olds, however, biases have yet to become deeply rooted. Around this time, kids are asking questions about their place in the world, giving them an opportunity to develop this curiosity and have positive experiences with diverse people can strongly influence how they perceive others in the future. And to me, that is the power of what this is. And like I said, it was so many unintended bonuses that I didn't expect to have in going into this, and it's so easy to be up here doing this. And typically, anyone who's been in a panel, you know you're nervous, you get a little nervous, but it's such an easy thing to talk about. But I would love for anybody here to have any questions. We would like to open it up to anybody, and or if you have participated in Empatico, we'd love to hear your opinions as well. Dorina?
Hi. First of all, I think you guys are awesome. I think Empatico is awesome, and I think everybody's awesome, and I'm having a kumbaya moment right now. It's really awesome. I think something about everything. But I'm going to challenge you a little bit on it. A couple of people have said something about, and it is nothing to do with Empatico, it's just the ideology of fluff.
okay.
So I really want to challenge you on this, because sometimes we have to have these hard questions that a lot of times we don't ask.
Sure.
What do you say to the naysayers or the people who just say, well, you're just experiencing this worldly thing, but you're not getting deeply into these topics, but it's a little surface culture. You're teaching about festivals, you're teaching about this. What can you say, and what can we bring back to the naysayers of saying, there's more to this than that? How can we do that?
This was not a plant, but this is great. I swear this was not prearranged.
Okay.
Remember the Ruby Bridges? We always talk about Ruby Bridges. If you're not familiar with her story, I hope you are. But the first grader in New Orleans, and she had to, it was integrated in the classroom. All the white students got pulled from the class. She had to be marshaled in. And it was really a horrible story with a great ending. But she's still alive. And she was the first student in that era to be, it was like 1958-ish. We'd have to check the date. But we always use that story. And that was what we teach the kids. And one of my students, Cassidy, the one that made that comment, later went home to her mother and said, you know, Mom, it's like the Ruby Bridges story. Segregation's stupid. Why do they do it? And so to say that, like, to say to the naysayers that you're selling the kids short when you say that they're not understanding something on a deep level, because often they perceive things far deeper than we give them credit for. She was connecting it. We didn't say, okay, Ruby Bridges, now let's turn on the TV. We're going to deal with all these kids in Memphis. Oh, this was all them taking these things. It's like that, the pointillism. We have an art teacher in here. Is it George Surratt? Is that the artist that does the, right? And he puts just the dots and the eyes mix the color. Well, that's what the teaching is. We do these little things where we introduce them and expose them, but it's the child that will take those and connect them and say, well, this is why connecting with our friends in Memphis is so important. And that's why this says, my Memphis friend, not my black friend. You know? So I don't think it's fluff at all. I think that anything that we're doing that increases the interaction of children who are different, who have been separated through all the different reasons that we know exist as to why we're a more segregated society now than ever before. We know what those reasons are, and we have found a way that for those moments of that day, we're able to de-escalate that and make a change in it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we still worked on the standards.
Yeah, it's all standards.
Our standards-based reading, writing, speaking, and listening were all involved, as well as social studies and science. So
Independent
Geography.
working, geography. Yeah,
Right,
I would say that this is far greater than any of the lessons that I had planned before we were entering into this Empatico challenge.
I think the natural curiosity aspect of these lessons in the classroom too, you're having all those cross-curricular connections, but the kids then take what you're learning and run with it and go home and do research at home and bring back an idea from a book and tie it all together, like you were saying. I really enjoyed that part in my classroom, was that the kids just took a simple idea and ran with it.
Yeah, and I do think that they took a lot of that learning and, like I said, carried it into different parts of the day. And they enjoyed every minute of it. So we had often two of the biggest things that when you go to any teacher conference that you're trying to improve on is classroom management and student engagement. We didn't have to worry about either one. They were 100% engaged, and when they're engaged, you don't need to worry about management. They were 100% involved in this. If anything, they were like, it's my turn, like when we were doing the one-on-one. It was really, any other questions, Dorina? Allison?
So if you felt that classroom management was not a problem, or engagement, do you have any advice? Were there challenges, and what were those challenges for doing this? If they obviously weren't in classroom management and engagement, then what's the hardest part of this? What kind of advice would you give a teacher who's going to use it?
Start in the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
We started our experience after spring break, and I just found that in order to get those deep connections, we just needed a little bit more time. We were state testing at the time, which my kids were really excited to learn that Delaware was not the only state to have state testing. Yeah, but to really get those meaningful interactions, I would say start with those beginning Empatico skill lessons at the beginning of the year and really build up, and then give yourself time to really dive deep into the lessons that are presented.
And I would say setting some classroom norms is a critical step that I would advise anyone who's going to interact with anybody outside of your classroom. Children are naturally reactive, and so we had a conversation that you might think something is funny, but it's not appropriate for you to let the person know that. So if they're wearing a headdress, or if their accent, or if there's something that they're doing that's culturally acceptable for them, you should not react in an immature way. And I was careful to say that it's all right for you to think it's funny. You're 7, but it's not okay to make someone feel that you're laughing at them. And there's the empathy jumping in right from before you even start. How would that person feel if you were to laugh at them? How would you feel if someone laughed at you? So I would say priming them for how to interact with students or teachers who are different. Once you start to interact, you don't have a lot of control over what happens, and so you need to have a class that's really ready to react to life. And it could be a kid that stutters, or it could be a child who has a speech impediment or an accent that's very thick and it's hard to understand. And just giving them those types of how would you handle those pays off big, because it is so great to see them show maturity that exceeds what some adults possess. So that would be my advice to anyone who's considering it.
To go along with that, I had a few kids in my classroom that would kind of push the button a little bit, but you would see their classmates kind of reminding them, hey, we need to do this, or we need to look at our respectful communication skills. So that was really neat too, that they were holding each other accountable for their interaction while we were collaborating.
So I'm going to kind of draw from what all three of you said. If you had more time and you started at the beginning of the year and you were going through the Empatico lessons, but we're all adapters and want to get into other things, what would you see you could be doing with your own curriculums in connecting them? And if you were doing this year after year, vertical movement through the grade levels, what do you see that you could do?
Do you want to answer? Do you want time to think? Wait time.
Empatico could be used at any part of the year. And so you have to talk to your partnering classroom teacher to discuss what's going on in your state to see how you can accommodate each other. I know when I go back at the beginning of the school year, they'll be learning about schools around the world. And so I could easily connect with different schools around the world and get the kids to interact. And if I wanted to do something with science based, I could have them maybe create their own school. Once they learn about the different schools around the world, what's the school that you could create? And so again, as we mentioned earlier, you do have autonomy to do what you need for your students. And I think that's what true teacher leaders do. They think outside the box. They do what works best for them. What do you want to specialize in? That's what I tell most teachers. Is it science or reading? And so here's a way through Empatico where you can make all your dreams come true right in your classroom with another classroom where you can capture those moments that can be very memorable for your students.
I think it's actually a question, Lynn, for the group here, because it's a think tank, and I know that when we were beginning to try to individualize, we wanted to go deeper, like you were saying, and we wanted children to bond with each other. So we had them go old school, writing letters to each other, and then pen paling, and then they met each other, and we had them one-on-one using the platform. And so that they were talking to each other and getting to know one another and talking about, got your letter, thanks a lot. Is it really true that you don't swim in the Mississippi, or whatever they had asked them? And so that was going back and forth, but that was building a relationship. But I was, at the time, we wanted to really get it out. We were starting to think out of the box. If we have 4 or 5 headphone sets and using the iPads or however way to connect, they could take math fact cards and just start building each other's math knowledge with one another, but they're playing a game with a kid in Memphis. Mm-hmm. And we all know that when you play with people, you tend to have your anxiety levels decrease, you start to become more comfortable, you start to become more personable, and that's when relationships start to form. And so playing games online would be great for the two of them. There's so many adaptive things, like using Google Slides, where they could create. I would have loved to have had part of your class with part of my class creating a slide together. Mm-hmm. Where instead of having our kids working in our silos over here on ours, now come up with something about the two of them that would unite them and have 3 or 4 groups, but having them work virtually by having access to the same Google Doc or Google Slide, or you know, having that kind of thing. So I think the sky's the limit about taking this and using this idea, but it's an entry point for a lot of people who don't know where to get started. It's simple, it's free, it's completely self-contained. You don't need to use the lessons. I found them to be tremendously advantageous.
When I was looking through the lessons and we were trying to decide which one to do, it was very evident that, oh, I could use this one to tie in this or this one to tie in this. There wasn't one that I could not meet a third grade standard with my students. They were just very high quality, very detailed. All the materials were there. There was no guesswork whatsoever.
And the parents were very big on the feedback too. I know that you had a lot, you've said often to me about your parents. My parents all said that they wanted to maintain contact. So they shared all their emails and wanted me to pass them along to Dr. Collins so that she would be able to send them to the families so that the kids can maintain the relationship even after the school year. So I mean, that to me is, when it goes to, is it fluff or can you go deeper? I think that this is, I would say to those people, try it.
I grew up mostly on the West Coast and Alaska a little bit, and you know, I never had a black teacher, and I went to school with 2 black kids my entire, until I graduated high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I see now, you know, from my viewpoint as a teacher now, I saw my teachers trying to introduce children.
Diane, Brett, Diane.
I hadn't looked over. I just see this as an amazing tool to bring people of color into very white country, and probably vice versa as well. And it's a step up from books. It's a step up from watching a movie.
Oh, it's huge.
Huge step. And I myself, I'm in 4th grade, got a Latina pen pal from Texas. That was in 1974. We are still in contact, except now it's Facebook. So that, I think, probably changed my opinion of people who live south of the Texas border drastically.
And so something that you just said that made me think of this. There's not a lot of male elementary, 2nd grade teachers, so your kids may have seen the first male teacher, and my kids saw the first woman who's a doctor who's black. So for them to sit there and to change the synapses of their little minds for it to be completely normal, and this is what, it's no longer unique or novel, so that it just will challenge, like this paragraph said, it will challenge something said to them later down the road. They know Dr. Collins. You know, and I never really stopped until you said that about what role our unique qualities present to the other class as examples of, we're not high majority. There's, I think 4% of the teaching population is male at 2nd grade, and you know, I don't know how many teachers have their doctorate degree. Forget women of color who have their doctorate degree. So it really challenges a lot of the stereotypes and the prejudices that they may eventually encounter. Well, that's it.
It reminds me of a term I've heard in math lately, a low floor, high ceiling task, right? So the sky is the limit with this tool, but the entry point is very accessible to everyone, no matter your comfort level with technology, what age of kids you teach. I did it this year. We did it at the end of the year. We didn't have a lot of time. We wrote letters to kids in Minneapolis. They wrote back. We made Flipgrid videos with each other, a shared grid. They could comment on each other's videos. So next year, I'm going to do a math talk with these guys, saying, how do you solve, you know, 36 times 11 or something like that. And then I love the idea of working on a shared document. You're in Minneapolis, you're in Delaware, but you're in this document together working, because you can isolate any standard you want. So I feel like my comfort level was satisfied this year, and I feel good about it, and I'm going to really try and push it. And like what you said, Melissa, what real teacher leaders do is they provide that opportunity, and how high can that sky go? So it's a perfect tool for that.
Anybody else?
The logistics of setting up the account. For some reason, I can't get into the account where it says sign up for free, and then it just goes to a blank screen for now. But is it just a teacher account, or are each student like?
Oh no, just teacher.
Okay.
And it's very simple. I don't know if it's the Wi-Fi in here. It is here. Okay. But, well, we want you to sign up because honestly, the goal is to really just reach all these children. And the thing that's really, there's such a benevolence within the company, and they're so sincere and honest. One of the things that really hasn't come up, because it doesn't exactly present itself for a panel, but I'll share it, is that we've often given them feedback, and they have no ego. They really are looking for you to inform them onto making their platform better, and many, if not all of the suggestions that have come forth, they've then researched and applied. One of them was quite simple. If you've ever done any kind of Zoom or Skype, there's a share screen feature. Well, in the platform with Empatico, originally there wasn't. We said, well, we're having to switch out to go to this other platform in order to do this part of our out of the box, we took it here kind of way. So they said, well, we don't want you to do that, so we'll add it in. And within weeks, they had a share screen feature in. So they're very receptive to that feedback, which is so wonderful that teacher input is being honestly received and reacted to. It's not garnish on the plate. It's really informing their decisions. It's nice.
So the students aren't communicating outside of your classroom then, or can they log in? How is the communication only?
It's through the teacher. It's
Okay.
teacher controlled.
Okay.
But then you can expand and do things like Flipgrid and other opportunities that can.
But as far as Empatico, there's not student accounts. There's not. When we did one-on-one, what we did was we Empaticoed, if that's a verb, to each other, got onto the platform, and then we would put the headphones on so that it wasn't disturbing the rest of the class. And there's natural times. It was during self-selected reading. That was another thing, Lynn, to answer your question. I really wanted them to become book buddies and to read to each other, because that's one of those things that when children think they're being heard, they put emphasis into those things that you want a second grader to improve on, the fluency, the correct words, attack skills, things like that. So I really want to look into that next year to make it where during self-selected reading time, it's going to become /Empatico, so that 4 or 5 kids make it a center where they're able to Empatico through to the other class and read to each other for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and really make it a powerful reading moment. Doreen, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick thing about one of the things about conferences, we want to make sure we have that follow-up. And so I'm interested in seeing how many people, like if there's an outlet or a way for people at this conference that said, hey, we're all in this room together. Is there a way that we could sign up together? Do we have emails? Can we exchange things? Or how do we build a network of saying, hey, you and I are teachers, Rachel. Let's get together. I want to do Empatico with you because you're from what state? Hey, I'm from Florida. Cool, let's do it. So Florida, Nevada.
We had a Nevada-Florida pairing, by the way. It was really cool because they were so tropical and then desert. Yeah. So just the climate difference is always a great entry point.
But we both palm trees. So
oh my God, there you go. Differences and similarities. It just happened. Oh, an Empatico moment.
How would you love it? How would you actually then, like I said, is the follow-through for all of this? Is there a way in which teachers can have maybe something to suggest to Empatico and say, I want to be Empaticoed. I want to be Empaticoed. Is there somewhere where there's a list of teachers that say, yes, let's sign it up?
So what I'm hearing you say is, like Microsoft Education has a big platform where Microsoft educators can all kind of get together. And Empatico currently is using a lot of social media to roll this out and share it in order for it to really hit those target numbers, like the paragraph wanted by 2020. So there's going to be Twitter chats that come up where Empatico will be conducting those. A lot of the fellows were writing blogs, posts, and things like that, so you can see those. But I'm going to make the suggestion to them to make a forum like a faculty lounge that's a virtual faculty lounge where they can all kind of interact with each other, and that was just invented here. Yeah. So.
Great line.
Right, so right, me too. Right. So that's pretty much, I think we're over time, but if anybody has any questions or wants to add anything, feel free.